Only a Subaltern by Rudyard Kipling. Not only to enforce by command, but to encourage by example the energetic discharge of duty, and the steady endurance of the difficulties and privations inseparable from military service. Bengal Army Regulations. They made Bobby Wick pass an examination at Sandhurst. He was a gentleman before he was gazetted, so when the Empress announced that Gentleman Cadet Robert Hannah Wick was posted as second lieutenant to the Tyneside tail twisters at Krambakar, he became an officer and a gentleman, which is an enviable thing. And there was joy in the house of Wick, where Mamma Wick and all the little Wicks fell upon their knees and offered incense to Bobby by virtue of his achievements. Papa Wick had been a commissioner in his day, holding authority over 3 millions of men in the Chota Baldana division, building great works for the good of the land, and doing his best to make 2 blades of grass grow where there was but one before. Of course, nobody knew anything about this in the little English village, where he was just old Mr. Wick, and had forgotten that he was a companion of the Order of the Star of India. He patted Bobby on the shoulder and said, "Well done, my boy." There followed, while the uniform was being prepared, an interval of pure delight, during which Bobby took brevetrank as a man at the women's swamp tennis parties and tea fights of the village, and I dare say, had his joining time been extended, would have fallen in love with several girls at once. Little country villages at home are very full of nice girls, because all the young men come out to India to make their fortunes. India, said Papa Wick, is the place. I've had 30 years of it, and begad I'd like to go back again. When you join the tail twisters, you'll be among friends. If everyone hasn't forgotten Wick of Chota Baldana, and a lot of people will be kind to you for our sakes. The mother will tell you more about outfit than I can, but remember this: stick to your regiment, Baba, stick to your regiment. You'll see men all round you going into the staff corps and doing every possible sort of duty but regimental, and you may be tempted to follow suit now, so long as you keep within your allowance, and I haven't stinted you there. Stick to the line, the whole line, and nothing but the line. Be careful how you back another young fool's bill, and if you fall in love with a woman 20 years older than yourself, don't tell me about it, that's all. With these counsels and many others equally valuable, did Papa Wick fortify Bobby Eyre that last awful night at Portsmouth, when the officers' quarters held more inmates than were provided for by the regulations, and the libertimen of the ships fell foul of the drafts for India, and the battle raged from the dockyard gates even to the slums of Longport, while the drabs of Fratton came down and scratched the faces of the Queen's officers. Bobby Wick, with an ugly bruise on his freckled nose, a sick and shaky detachment to maneuver in ship, and the comfort of 50 scornful females to attend to, had no time to feel homesick, till the Malabar reached mid-channel, when he doubled his emotions with a little guard visiting, and a great many other matters. The tail twisters were a most particular regiment. Those who knew them least said that they were eaten up with side, but their reserve and their internal arrangements generally were merely protective diplomacy. Some 5 years before, the colonel commanding had looked into the 14 fearless eyes of 7 plump and juicy subalterns, who had all applied to enter the staff corps, and had asked them why the 3 stars should he, a colonel of the line, command a dashed nursery for double-dashed bottle-suckers, who put on condemned tin spurs and rode qualified mokes at the hiatused heads of forsaken black regiments. He was a rude man, and a terrible, wherefore the remnant took measures with the half-butt as an engine of public opinion, till the rumor went abroad that young men, who used the tail twisters as a crutch to the staff corps, had many and varied trials to endure. However, a regiment had just as much right to its own secrets as a woman. When Bobby came up from Deolali and took his place among the tail twisters, it was gently but firmly borne in upon him that the regiment was his father and his mother and his indissolubly wedded wife, and that there was no crime under the canopy of heaven blacker than that of bringing shame on the regiment, which was the beast-shooting, bistrilled, best-set-up, bravest, most illustrious, and in all respects most desirable regiment within the compass of the 7 seas. He was taught the legends of the mess plate, from the great grinning golden gods that had come out of the summer palace in Pekin to the silver-mounted Markhorhorn snuff-mull, presented by the last Roman 100, he who spake to the 7 subalterns, and every one of those legends told him of battles fought at long odds without fear as without support, of hospitality Catholic as an Arabs, of friendships deep as the sea and steady as the fighting line, of honor won by hard roads for honor's sake, and of instant and unquestioning devotion to the regiment that claims the lives of all and lives forever. More than once, too, he came officially into contact with the regimental colors, which looked like the lining of a bricklayer's hat on the end of a chewed stick. Bobby did not kneel and worship them, because British subalterns are not constructed in that manner. Indeed, he condemned them for their weight at the very moment that they were filling with awe and other more noble sentiments. But best of all was the occasion when he moved with the tail twisters in review order at the breaking of a November day, allowing for duty men, and the regiment was 1,080 strong, and Bobby belonged to them, for was he not a subaltern of the whole line, and nothing but the lineas the tramp of 2,160 sturdy ammunition boots attested he would not have changed. Places with Dayton of the horse battery whirling by in a pillar of cloud, to a chorus of strong right strong left, or Hoganale of the White Hussars, leading his squadron for all it was worth, with the price of horseshoes thrown in, or Tick Boileau trying to live up to his fierce blue and gold turban, while the wasps of the Bengal cavalry stretched to a gallop in the wake of the long lolloping wailers of the White Hussars. They fought through the clear cool day, and Bobby felt a little thrill run down his spine when he heard the tinkle-tinkle-tinkle of the empty cartridge cases hopping from the breech blocks after the roar of the volleys, for he knew that he should live to hear that sound in action. The review ended in a glorious chase across the plain batteries thundering after cavalry, to the huge disgust of the White Hussars, and the Tyneside tail twisters hunting a Sikh regiment, till the lean Lathi Singhs panted with exhaustion. Bobby was dusty and dripping long before noon, but his enthusiasm was merely focused, not diminished. He returned to sit at the feet of Revere his skipper, that is to say the captain of his company, and to be instructed in the dark art and mystery of managing men, which is a very large part of the profession of arms. "If you haven't a taste that way," said Revere between his puffs of his cheroot, "you'll never be able to get the hang of it. But remember, Bobby, 'tisn't the best drill, though drill is nearly everything that hauls a regiment through hell and out on the other side. It's the man who knows how to handle men, goatmen, swinemen, dogmen, and so on." "Dormer, for instance," said Bobby. "I think he comes under the head of foolmen. He mopes like a sick owl." "That's where you make your mistake, my son. Dormer isn't a fool yet, but he's a dashed dirty soldier, and his room corporal makes fun of his socks before kit inspection. Dormer, being 2/3 pure brute, goes into a corner and growls." "How do you know?" said Bobby, admiringly. "Because a company commander has to know these things, because, if he does not know, he may have crime murder brewing under his very nose, and yet not see that it's there. Dormer is being badgered out of his mind, big as he is, and he hasn't intellect enough to resent it. He's taken to quiet boozing, and Bobby, when the butt of a room goes on the drink or takes to moping by himself, measures are necessary to pull him out of himself. What measures? Man can't run round coddling his men forever. No, the men would precious soon show him that he was not wanted. You've got to hear." The color sergeant entered with some papers. Bobby reflected for a while as Revere looked through the company forms. "Does Dormer do anything, Sergeant?" Bobby asked with the air of one continuing an interrupted conversation. "No, sir. Does his duty like a hortomato," said the sergeant, who delighted in long words. "A dirty soldier, and ease under full stoppages for new kit. It's covered with scales, sir." "Scales? What scales?" "Fish scales, sir. Ease always pockin' in the mud by the river, and a cleanin' them muchly fish with his thumbs." Revere was still absorbed in the company papers, and the sergeant, who was sternly fond of Bobby, continued, "He generally goes down there when e's got his skinful. Beggin' your pardon, sir, and they do say that the more lush inebriated is the more fish catches. They call the loony fishmonger in the company, sir." Revere signed the last paper, and the sergeant retreated. "It's a filthy amusement," sighed Bobby to himself, then aloud to Revere, "Are you really worried about Dormer?" "A little. You see, he's never mad enough to send to a hospital or drunk enough to run in, but at any minute he may flare up brooding and sulking. As he does, he resents any interest being shown in him, and the only time I took him out shooting, he all but shot me by accident." "I fish," said Bobby with a wry face. "I hire a countryboat and go down the river from Thursday to Sunday, and the amiable Dormer goes with Mafe. You can spare us both." "You blazing young fool," said Revere, but his heart was full of much more pleasant words. Bobby, the captain of Adoni, with Private Dormer for mate, dropped down the river on Thursday mornings, Private at the bow, the subaltern at the helm. The private glared uneasily at the subaltern, who respected the reserve of the private. After 6 hours, Dormer paced to the stern, saluted, and said, "Beg pardon, sir, but was you ever on the Durham Canal?" No, said Bobby Wick, come and have some tiffin. They ate in silence as the evening fell. Private Dormer broke forth, speaking to himself. High was on the Durham Canal. Jess, such a night come next week. 12-month atrelin of my toes in the water. He smoked, and said no more till bedtime. The witchery of the dawn turned the gray river reaches to purple, gold, and opal, and it was as though the lumbering Donny crept across the splendors of a new heaven. Private Dormer popped his head out of his blanket and gazed at the glory below and around. Weldom me eyes, said Private Dormer in an odd whisper. This air is like a bloomin' gallantricio. For the rest of the day he was dumb, but achieved an ensanguined filthiness through the cleaning of big fish. The boat returned on Saturday evening. Dormer had been struggling with speech since noon. As the lines and luggage were being disembarked, he found tongue. Beg I pardon, sir, he said, but would you min shacken ends with me, sir? Of course not, said Bobby, and he shook accordingly. Dormer returned to barracks and Bobby to mess. He wanted a little quiet, and some fishing, I think, said Bobby. My aunt. But he's a filthy sort of animal. Have you ever seen him clean them muchly fish with his thumbs? Anyhow, said Revere 3 weeks later, he's doing his best to keep his things clean. When the spring died, Bobby joined in the general scramble for hill leave, and to his surprise and delight, secured 3 months. As good a boy as I want, said Revere the admiring skipper. The best of the batch, said the adjutant to the colonel. Keep back that young scrimshanker Porkis, sir, and let Revere make him sit up. So Bobby departed joyously to Simla Pahar with a tin box of gorgeous raiment. Son of Wickold Wick of Chota Baldana, ask him to dinner, dear, said the aged men. What a nice boy, said the matrons and the maids. First-class place, Simla o Reaping, said Bobby Wick, and ordered new white cord breeches on the strength of it. We're in a bad way, wrote Revere to Bobby at the end of 2 months. Since you left, the regiment has taken to fever, and is fairly rotten with it. 100 in hospital, about 100 in cell-strinking. To keep off fever and the companies on parade 15 files strong at the outside. There's rather more sickness in the out villages than I care for, but then I am so blistered with prickly heat that I am ready to hang myself. What's the yarn about your mashing amiss? Haverly up there, not serious. I hope you're over young to hang millstones round your neck, and the colonel will turf you out of that in double quick time if you attempt it. It was not the colonel that brought Bobby out of Simla, but a much more to be respected commandant. The sickness in the out villages spread. The bazaar was put out of bounds. And then came the news that the tail twisters must go into camp. The message flashed to the hill station's collar relief stopped officers, recalled alas for the white gloves in the neatly soldered boxes, the rides, and the dances and picnics that were to he the loves half-spoken, and the debts unpaid without demur, and without question fast as tongue could fly or pony gallop back to their regiments, and their batteries, as though they were hastening to their weddings, fled the subalterns. Bobby received his orders on returning from a dance at Viceregal Lodge, where he had but only the Haverly girl knows what Bobby had said, or how many waltzes he had claimed for the next ball. 6 in the morning saw Bobby at the Tonga office in the drenching rain, the whirl of the last waltz still in his ears, and an intoxication due neither to wine nor waltzing in his brain. Good man, shouted Dayton of the horse battery through the mists. Were you raised at Tonga? I am coming with you, ow. But I've had a head and a half. I didn't sit out all night. They say the battery's awful bad. And he hummed dolorously, leave the what at the what's its name, leave the flock. Without shelter, leave the corpse uninterred, leave the bride at the altar. My faith, it'll be more bally corpse than bride though this journey. Jump in, Bobby, get on, coachman. On the Umbella platform waited a detachment of officers discussing the latest news from the stricken cantonment, and it was here that Bobby learned the real condition of the tail twisters. They went into camp, said an elderly major recalled from the Whistables at Mussoorie, to a sickly native regiment. They went into camp with 210 sick, in carts 210 fever cases only, and the balance looking like so many ghosts with sore eyes a Madras regiment could have walked through. But they were as fit as bedamned when I left them, said Bobby. Then you'd better make them as fit as bedamned when you rejoin, said the major brutally. Bobby pressed his forehead against the rain-splashed windowpane as the train lumbered across the sodden doab, and prayed for the health of the Tyneside tail twisters. Nanny Tal had sent down her contingent with all speed. The lathering ponies of the Dalhousie Road staggered into Pathankot, taxed to the full stretch of their strength, while from cloudy Darjeeling, the Calcutta mail whirled up the last straggler of the little army, that was to fight a fight in which was neither metal nor honor for the winning against an enemy, none other than the sickness that destroyeth in the noonday. And as each man reported himself, he said this is a bad business, and went about his own forthwith, for every regiment and battery in the cantonment was under canvas, the sickness bearing them company. Bobby fought his way through the rain to the tail twister's temporary mess, and Revere could have fallen on the boy's neck for the joy of seeing that ugly wholesome phiz once more. Keep 'em amused and interested, said Revere. They went on the drink, poor fools, after the first 2 cases, and there was no improvement. Oh, it's good to have you back, Bobby Porkis is ainver mind. Dayton came over from the artillery camp to attend a dreary mess dinner, and contributed to the general gloom by nearly weeping over the condition of his beloved battery. Porkis so far forgot himself as to insinuate that the presence of the officers could do no earthly good, and that the best thing would be to send the entire regiment into hospital and let the doctors look after them. Porkis was demoralized with fear, nor was his peace of mind restored when Revere said coldly, "Oh, the sooner you go out the better. If that's your way of thinking, any public school could send us 50 good men in your place. But it takes time, Porkis, and money, and a certain amount of trouble, to make a regiment. S'pose you're the person we go into camp for, eh?" Whereupon Porkis was overtaken with a great and chilly fear, which a drenching in the rain did not allay, and 2 days later quitted this world for another, where men do fondly hope allowances are made for the weaknesses of the flesh. The regimental sergeant major looked wearily across the sergeant's mess tent when the news was announced. "There goes the worst of them," he said. "It'll take the best, and then please God it'll stop." The sergeants were silent till one said it couldn't be him, and all knew of whom Travis was thinking. Bobby Wick stormed through the tents of his company, rallying, rebuking mildly, as is consistent with the regulations, chaffing the faint-hearted, hailing the sound into the watery sunlight when there was a break in the weather, and bidding them be of good cheer, for their trouble was nearly at an end, scuttling on his dun pony round the outskirts of the camp, and heading back men who, with the innate perversity of British soldiers, were always wandering into infected villages, or drinking deeply from rain-flooded marshes, comforting the panic-stricken with rude speech, and more than once tending the dying who had no friends. Men without townies, organizing with banjos and burned cork sing-songs, which should allow the talent of the regiment full play, and generally, as he explained, playing the giddy guarding goat all round. "You're worth half a dozen of us," Bobby said Revere, in a moment of enthusiasm. "How the devil do you keep it up?" Bobby made no answer, but had Revere looked into the breast pocket of his coat, he might have seen there a sheaf of badly written letters, which perhaps accounted for the power that possessed the boy. A letter came to Bobby every other day. The spelling was not above reproach, but the sentiments must have been most satisfactory, for on receipt Bobby's eyes softened marvelously, and he was wont to fall into a tender abstraction for a while ere, shaking his cropped head, he charged into his work. By what power he drew after him the hearts of the roughest, and the tail-twisters counted in their ranks some rough diamonds indeed, was a mystery to both Skipper and Roman 100, who learned from the regimental chaplain that Bobby was considerably more in request in the hospital tents than the Reverend John Emery. "The men seem fond of you. Are you in the hospitals much?" said the colonel, who did his daily round, and ordered the men to get well with a hardness that did not cover his bitter grief. "A little, sir," said Bobby. "Shouldn't go there too often, if I were you. They say it's not contagious, but there's no use in running unnecessary risks. We can't afford to have you down, 6 days later, it was with the utmost difficulty that the postrunner plashed his way out to the camp, with mailbags, for the rain was falling in torrents. Bobby received a letter, bore it off to his tent, and the program for the next week's sing-song being satisfactorily disposed of, sat down to answer it. For an hour the unhandy pen twirled over the paper, and where sentiment rose to more than normal tide level, Bobby Wick stuck out his tongue and breathed heavily. He was not used to letter writing. "Beg I pardon, sir," said a voice at the tent door, "but Dormer's orrid bad, sir, and they've taken him orf, sir." "Damn Private Dormer, and you too," said Bobby Wick, running the blotter over the half-finished letter. "Tell him ill come in the morning." "'E's awful bad, sir," said the voice hesitatingly. There was an undecided squelching of heavy boots. "Well," said Bobby impatiently, excusin' himself before and for talkin' the liberty says, "It would be a comfort for to assist I am, sir, if Tattoo Lau get my pony here comin' out of the rain, till I am ready." "What blasted nuisances you are. That's brandy, drink some, you want it." Hang on to my stirrup, and tell me if I go mo fast. Strengthened by a forefinger nip, which he swallowed without a wink, the hospital orderly kept up with the slipping mud-stained and very disgusted pony as it shambled to the hospital tent. Private Dormer was certainly horrid bad. He had all but reached the stage of collapse, and was not pleasant to look upon. "What's this, Dormer?" said Bobby, bending over the man. "You're not going out this time. You've got to come fishin' with me once or twice more yet." The blue lips parted, and in the ghost of a whisper said, "Beg I pardon, sir, disturbin' of you now, but would you min olden my and sir?" Bobby sat on the side of the bed, and the icy cold hand closed on his own like a vice forcing a lady's ring, which was on the little finger deep into the flesh. Bobby set his lips, and waited. The water dripping from the hem of his trousers. An hour passed, and the grasp of the hand did not relax, nor did the expression on the drawn face change. Bobby, with infinite craft, lit himself a cheroot with the left hand. His right arm was numbed to the elbow and resigned himself to a night of pain. Dawn showed a very white-faced subaltern sitting on the side of a sick man's cot, and a doctor in the doorway, using language unfit for publication. "Have you been here all night, you young ass?" said the doctor. "There or thereabouts," said Bobby ruefully. "He's frozen on to me." Dormer's mouth shut with a click. He turned his head. Inside, the clinging band opened, and Bobby's arm fell useless at his side. "Hell do," said the doctor quietly. "It must have been a toss-up all through the night. Think you're to be congratulated on this case." "Oh bosh," said Bobby. "I thought the man had gone out long agoonly. I didn't care to take my hand away. Rub my arm down, there's a good chap. What a grip the brute has. I am chilled to the marrow." He passed out of the tent shivering. Private Dormer was allowed to celebrate his repulsive death by strong waters. 4 days later, he sat on the side of his cot, and said to the patients mildly, "It a liken to a spoken to him, so I should." But at that time, Bobby was reading yet another letter. Had the most persistent correspondent of any man in Campend, was even then about to write that the sickness had abated, and in another week at the outside, would be gone. He did not intend to say that the chill of a sick man's hand seemed to have struck into the heart whose capacities for affection he dwelt on at such length. He did intend to enclose the illustrated program of the forthcoming sing-song, whereof he was not a little proud. He also intended to write on many other matters, which do not concern us, and doubtless would have done so, but for the slight feverish headache which made him dull and unresponsive at mess. "You are overdoing it." Bobby said his skipper might give the rest of us credit of doing a little work. "You go on, as if you were the whole mess rolled into one. Take it easy." "I will," said Bobby. "I am feeling done up somehow." Revere looked at him anxiously, and said nothing. There was a flickering of lanterns about the camp that night, and a rumor that brought men out of their cots to the tent doors, a paddling of the naked feet of doula-bearers, and the rush of a galloping horse. "What's up?" asked 20 tents, and through 20 tents ran the answeric ease down. They brought the news to Revere, and he groaned. "Anyone but Bobby and I shouldn't have cared. The sergeant major was right." "Not going out this journey," gasped Bobby, as he was lifted from the dually. "Not going out this journey." Then, with an air of supreme conviction, "I can't, you see." "Not if I can do anything," said the surgeon major, who had hastened over from the mess, where he had been dining. He and the regimental surgeon fought together with death for the life of Bobby Wick. Their work was interrupted by a hairy apparition in a blue-gray dressing gown, who stared in horror at the bed, and cried, "Oh my God, it can't be I am," until an indignant hospital orderly whisked him away. If care of man and desire to live could have done aught, Bobby would have been saved. As it was, he made a fight of 3 days, and the surgeon major's brow uncreased. "Well, save him," yet he said, and the surgeon, who though he ranked with the captain, had a very youthful heart, went out upon the word, and pranced joyously in the mud. "Not going out this journey," whispered Bobby Wick gallantly at the end of the 3rd day. "Bravo," said the surgeon major. "That's the way to look at it, Bobby." As evening fell, a gray shade gathered round Bobby's mouth, and he turned his face to the tent wall wearily. The surgeon major frowned. "I am awfully tired," said Bobby very faintly. "What's the use of bothering me with medicine? I don't want it. Let me alone." The desire for life had departed, and Bobby was content to drift away on the easy tide of death. "It's no good," said the surgeon major. "He doesn't want to live. He's meeting it, poor child," and he blew his nose. Half a mile away, the regimental band was playing the overture to the sing-song, for the men had been told that Bobby was out of danger. The clash of the brass and the wail of the horns reached Bobby's ears. "Is there a single joy or pain that I should never knew?" You do not love me, tease in vain, bid me goodbye and go. An expression of hopeless irritation crossed the boy's face, and he tried to shake his head. The surgeon major bent down. What is it, Bobby? Not that waltz, muttered Bobby. That's our owner, very honest own mummy dear. With this, he sank into the stupor that gave place to death early next morning. Revere, his eyes red at the rims, and his nose very white, went into Bobby's tent to write a letter to Papa Wick, which should bow the white head of the ex-commissioner of Chota Baldana. In the keenest sorrow of his life, Bobby's little store of papers lay in confusion on the table, and among them, a half-finished letter. The last sentence ran, "So you see, darling, there is really no fear, because as long as I know you care for me, and I care for you, nothing can touch me." Revere stayed in the tent for an hour. When he came out, his eyes were redder than ever. Private Conklin sat on a turn-down bucket and listened to a not unfamiliar tune. Private Conklin was a convalescent and should have been tenderly treated. "Ho," said Private Conklin, "there's another bloomin' orf'cer dead." The bucket shot from under him, and his eyes filled with a smithyful of sparks. A tall man in a blue-gray bedgown was regarding him with deep disfavor. "You ought to take shame for yourself, conky orf'cer, bloomin' orf'cer. I'll learn you to misname the likes of Roman 999, Hangel, bloomin' Hangel, that's what 'e is." And the hospital orderly was so satisfied with the justice of the punishment that he did not even order Private Dormer back to his cot.